I mean, what inspired you to run for the House? I mean, being a representative for the state legislature, what inspired you to do that?
So that's a long story. I'll make it brief. I originally ran in 2010 for U.S. Congress. Mm-hmm. I was teaching economics at the university. I was heavily involved in our real estate business during the Great Recession. I was concerned with policy that was happening at the national level, and so I just said I want to do something about it, and I didn't know what to do or how to make an impact. And so I said, where can I have a voice?
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? If I run, then I'll have a voice.
Yeah.
And so I ran as a candidate. I lost at the state convention in 2010 by 1 vote.
Oh man.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a tough loss, but that's the way that it worked, you know. And I stayed involved. I got involved in the state central committee. I ran a second race for special election for Utah State Treasurer. Right. I have a background in finance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I ran that special election. I won the special election, but I lost that. But I didn't get appointed by 1 vote. So you have to be in a special election. You have to actually be appointed by the governor. So I won the special election, but I didn't get appointed by the governor. So I lost two elections by 1 vote. So when this opportunity came up, when former Representative Lowry Snow announced that he wasn't going to run again, I said, all right, third time's the charm.
Yeah, third time's the charm.
Here we go.
Yeah, Lincoln ran a bunch of times, and he only needed the one victory, right? Well, so take me back to 2010, though. What do you remember? What specific policy issues that really, were inspiring you to have a voice? Was there any particular thing?
It was
because I know a lot happened.
There were a lot of things that were happening there. So maybe if I could just point out one that I think
one
would
that
be
jumped
simple.
out.
So I was teaching an economics class, and we were obviously talk about supply and demand, right? And the narrative across the country was that we were going to expand healthcare to reach millions of more families, which we want people to have access to healthcare. Don't get me wrong,
right?
So we're gonna expand access to healthcare to millions of more families, okay? And at the same time, the narrative was that we were going to lower cost. So you're going to expand demand. You're implementing structural constraints that will reduce the number of service providers because you're making it harder for people to provide that service, right? That's a reduction in supply. And the narrative we were telling the country, the narrative that was being shared across the country is that we're going to lower cost. In a basic supply and demand model, like that's not feasible, right? It doesn't work that way. The only way you can go is rising costs. And so I became very fearful that we have a policy that is ignoring the economics, and it sounds great, but it doesn't work. It's kind of like you can build any rocket that you want if you want to try and get to outer space, but the laws of physics are going to govern whether or not it'll actually fly.
Yeah.
And we can make any policy that we want, but you can't suspend the laws of economics.
Yeah.
And that's what we were trying to do in 2010.
I use this analogy a lot of times. We're both in real estate, residential on my side more, but a lot of times I use this analogy to help sellers understand the value of their house is that there's a recipe when you're making cookies, but what's the difference between a good tasting cookie and it's a cookie, but it's not one anybody wants to eat, right? There's a specific process. There's a specific ingredients that has to go into play. And that's the thing that always confounds me when it comes to government is that there are a lot of clear-cut rules of how especially when it comes to economics, like these things will work and then these things will not work. We've tried these things over and over again. So it's odd to me that we continue to ignore some of these supply and demand issues, which taking that a step further is something that we both wanted to talk about as well. Is it seems like similar policies in housing is being laid out in front of us as well, right? Is that we're having some real challenges with creating enough supply with the rising demand, which just comes from an evolution in population and, a bunch of kids that are needing to leave their house and there's not enough houses for them to buy, which causes multiple offers. It's just a quick anecdote is we had a listing, the comparable properties show it at $285. It's a townhome, downtown St. George, 2-bed, 2-bath, nothing, super fancy. It was built, in I think this was the late 80s. It was built in the late 80s. And we had 9 offers on it right out of the gate.
This was in 2021, right?
This is right now.
Right now.
So like
spring of 2024. A lot of people think the housing market is somehow collapsing or in free fall. That's not it.
It's not even close.
Look, our market research shows that for March of 2024, Orange County, California, which a lot of folks think people are just leaving California and it's a tough market, tough economy. Our market research shows that right now in 2024 that median home price is up 16% year over year.
Yeah.
They never actually went down from 2021. It just 22 was higher, 23 was higher. Now we're in 24 and it's higher.
Well, their supply went up in 23 and then started, I guess it was late 22, 23, their supply was going up and then it started going back down. It turned around and went right back down.
And here's the crazy thing is you think about, okay, well, in 2023, in March of 2023, median home value there was $1 million, right? Well, if it goes up 16%, that means it went up $160,000 in 1 year.
Yeah.
Right. And we start talking about affordability, bringing this back home to Utah, bringing this back to Washington County. We're having a big time conversation about housing attainability, housing affordability, right? I'm not talking today about affordable housing, which is where we're subsidizing, rent control, all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about just access to housing. And we're doing some good things. But overall, this is a very, very difficult problem to solve, and it's not something that we can solve quickly. And going back to how this problem really comes to be, it is interesting to go look at the late 1970s and the 80s, because what happened then was interest rates went from, in 1970 to 1980, interest rates went from 6 to 18%, right? They went up 3 times. Home prices, people think the home prices went down, but they didn't. Home prices actually went up nationwide by 175% over that decade, more than in any decade post-World War II.
Right.
So home prices were rising and interest rates were rising. You got to the early 80s, and it was painfully difficult for people to buy a home, to be able to afford it with their payments and everything. And it took a number of years to work through that. Now we look back and say, if I could have bought a house in 1980, I'd pay that price. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
But we forget how hard it was at that time, given interest rates, wages, everything. It was very, very difficult time to buy a house.